Hi guys, in this video I go over a bit more in-depth example of how to interact with MySQL from Java. If you don't know yet how to connect to MySQL from Java, please check out my other video. I put a link in the description below. I already created a basic Java project here. This is a Maven project. It has a POM XML file and that has the MySQL connector dependency that allows me to connect to MySQL. It also has two Java classes named employee and employee database. The employee is a simple Java class that has three member variables: ID, first name, and last name. It has a constructor which sets these member variables, and it has getter and setter methods. It also overrides toString to output a readable description of an object of this class. Now what I want to do is I want to create a database and a table that stores objects of this class. If I open the command prompt and I go to MySQL -u root -p, enter the password, and then do the show database command, there are only the 4 system databases available right now. So I want to create a new database, and I want to do that from Java. For that, I created the employee database class. Now this class has a private member variable to store the connection to the database. So that allows me to call different methods and always reuse the same connection. It also has a final constant that stores the employee's database name, and then it has a constructor. The first statement in the constructor calls the connect method with the username root and the password 1234. This connect method is the one that I implemented. When I go to this method, it has the connection string and then calls driver manager get connection, passes the connection string in, and the user and password arguments of this method. This returns the connection, and then I return it to the one that calls this method. Now if I go back to the constructor, you can see I get the connection returned and I store it in the member variable. Next, what I do is I execute show databases. Show databases then gives me the names of the databases that are available, and I check if the list or the set of databases already contains a database named employees. If not, I create the database. Now before we move on, let's take a look at the execute method. That's a method I implemented as well. So here I first create an empty hash set. Then I take the member variable, the connection, and create a new statement. And on that statement, I execute the query that is passed to this method. Now on the method call, in the constructor, it was show databases. That returns a result set, and then it iterates over and gets, for each row, it gets the value in the very first column. So that will be the database name, and it keeps adding them to the hash set that will be returned. Now I add a breakpoint here, and then I run this program. I step over this line, and then when I inspect the set, there are 4 databases available, and these are the 4 system databases. Now it checks if employees is among the databases that exist. It is not, and so it calls the create database method. I step into that method, and here it simply creates a new statement and calls create database employees. After that, I will go back to the main, then create a statement to use the employees database for the next statements. And then it executes the command show tables. Note that this execute method is the same that I called here for show databases. So it simply executes the command and then returns the very first column. And this will be a set of tables. So you can see the size is 0, the set is empty, so it doesn't yet have an employees table. So I call the create table method. And this creates a new statement. It calls create table. %s is a placeholder. Note that I call string.format. So any %s expects a string that will be placed into this position. And the string that I pass in is the employees. So it puts employees right at this position. So essentially it tells, or it runs the SQL statement, create table employees with the ID of type integer as primary key, first name of type varchar, and last name of type varchar, both 32 characters long. Now, after it executes this method, the constructor is complete. So again, I connected to the database, I checked which databases exist, created the employees database, then I used that database employees, I showed the tables that are there, checked if it has a table employees. It did not, so I created the table employees. Now when I go back to the terminal, and here I run show databases, I can now see that there's an employees database. And when I do use employees and I do show tables, you can see it now has a show, it has the employees table that I created as well. Now let's go back to the main. So on the main, I called the constructor. This was the employee database. And this is wrapped inside a try-catch block. The reason for this is that when I scroll up here, I implement auto-closable. And auto-closable is simply a close method that I override. It is here, and I check if connection is not null. If it's not null, I close the connection to the database. And since the close operation can also throw, I have that in a try-catch block to catch it and then lock it to the console. So by using the auto-closable here in the try-catch block, I simply say, whenever I exit the try-catch block, I want it to automatically close the connection to the database. Now let's take a look at the first statement inside the try-catch block. I have the database, which is the employee database instance, and I call get employees. So when I enter this method, this creates an array list of employee objects. Then it creates a statement, and the statement executes select everything from employees. Now initially this is empty, so it skips the iterator and returns. Then here it checks if this list is empty, essentially if there are no employee records in that database table. Then let's create and insert some employees. So here I call the insert employee method, and then I create a new object of employee and pass it to that method. So here I create an employee with ID 1 named John and last name Doe. And then I pass this one to the insert employee method. Now I enter that method. This creates a new statement. So this runs the SQL statement insert into employees. I again use string.format and pass in employees for this placeholder. And then it will use the columns ID, first name and last name, and respective values employee ID, employee first name, and employee last name. Now I go back to the main and I passed in John and Doe. So let's go to the terminal and check what's currently in the database. So select star from employees. And I can see here there's ID 1, John, and Doe stored in it. Next, I create another employee named Mary and Jane. And then I pass that employee object back to insert employee. And here it gets inserted. It creates a statement and it runs the SQL statement insert into employees with the columns ID, first name, last name, and the values the employee ID, the employee first name, and the employee last name. Note that the very first one here is an integer. That's why you see that I just have quotes. I end the quotes and then I place the integer in there. And for the other two, first name, last name, those are strings. That's why I use the escape double quote character here. And to end it, I do it as well. So essentially what I'm trying to generate here is insert into employees, ID, first name, last name, and then values, which would be, for example, to Mary Jane. This is the SQL statement that I'm executing. So here I don't have any quotes since it's an integer, but here I need quotes. And because I don't want to end the string, I want to build the quotes inside the string, I use the escape characters. Now let's go back. Then I create another employee object and insert it to the database. And then here I again call the getDatabase method to update my database list. So this one now has the 3 objects that I created. And then what I do is I iterate over them and I output them to the console. I let this run. And when I check the console, I can see the 3 employees: John Doe, Mary Jane, Steve Stevenson. Now when I go back to the console and do the last query again, select star from employees, I can see these 3 in the application. Now if I go back to Java, Java has ended. Java is no longer running. So when I run this again, and let's put a breakpoint here, I run this. Now we can see the employees that I have. Those are 3. John Doe, Mary Jane, and Steve Stevenson. And they now persisted beyond my Java application that I ran. So I run it once, I can shut down the computer. When I start it again, I can get the same objects back. So I have persistence between the executions of my program. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.